Today we will study supply chain strategy, which is trying to understand different companies' approach to how they design and manage their supply chains. Okay? This is useful because whichever case you do, you'll be able to see what sort of strategy the company has and see how their decisions are being driven by that strategy. Okay. So some of you might have taken a course on business strategy already, where you talk about the company strategy or the competitive strategy, which basically identifies which markets is the company going to play in. Okay? Are they going to target luxury cars or economical cars? Are they going to target a particular geographic region for their product? And that sort of strategy kind of determines the broad view of which markets the company is going to operate in. Okay? Now, based on that strategy, the supply chain strategy its role is to support that strategy and take the big high-level supply chain decisions so that the supply chain is designed to support this strategy. Okay? So what are some high-level decisions? Now, I think the best way is to just go with examples. In 2013, some of you might remember, in the holiday season in December, there were a lot of late deliveries of holiday packages. Okay? I believe UPS was the company where they promised, like, say, 2-day delivery to customers, and then the packages like Christmas gifts, other things that people were shipping did not arrive on time. Okay? And what happened was they actually ran out of capacity, especially the air capacity where they do like overnight shipping to different parts of USA and so forth, right? And a lot of people who bought gifts for their loved ones off Amazon.com were unhappy, saying it didn't arrive in time, I want to return it, things like that, right? And so Amazon said, okay, this is no good. We are too reliant on partners like FedEx and UPS to be able to satisfy our customers. So we are going to take matters into our own hand. And since that year, Amazon has been quietly building up their own transportation infrastructure. So now they have airplanes which can take Amazon packages here and there. They have their own fleet of trucks. It's not at a scale where they can just not use UPS and FedEx, but they at least have some of their own transportation capacity. So going into this to have your own transportation capacity was a strategic decision for Amazon. Now, how does that link to their company strategy? Their company strategy is that they want to have be like a one-stop shop for customers, buy everything from Amazon. For them to be a one-stop shop, people have to be able to trust when they will deliver stuff. Otherwise, anything time-sensitive, you're not going to order from Amazon, right? If this is time-sensitive, Amazon might not deliver, you'll go someplace else. Right? So for them, on-time delivery is crucial to be able to cater to most consumer-level goods. Okay? And for that, their supply chain strategy is that they're going to have a lot of their own resources and their own transportation infrastructure. So the two kind of fit together to support each other. Okay? So what is a strategy? It's just a pattern of decision making. And the decisions we're going to talk about are not decisions at the level of one customer order. They are decisions which affect the entire supply chain. So strategy in this course is basically decisions which can't be easily reversed. You get kind of locked into them. They require maybe some capital expenditure. You're thinking long term. All those sorts of decisions are going to be strategic decisions. Okay. So we're going to go through this 4-step process to make sure that, whichever supply chain we're looking at, how do we make sure that we have an appropriate strategy which aligns with what we're trying to do. So don't worry about reading this whole slide. We're going to go into details of each step. Okay? The first step is to understand the demand. Because if you want to talk about the whole purpose of this course in one line, that is to meet demand, right? Make supply meet demand, okay, as efficiently and effectively as you can. So we have to understand demand, that we're trying to satisfy. Okay? Some of the attributes of demand that are important for a supply chain strategy are, how long are customers willing to wait? Okay? The customer that walks up to a vending machine is probably a customer who doesn't want to wait. He wants something to drink right now, versus a customer who orders a 12-pack of cans on Walmart.com or Amazon.com. That company is willing to wait. So different customers have different willingness to wait, and so we need to understand what is the response time we must have to customer requests to fulfill that demand. We also want to understand what are the quantities the product is demanded in. What is the variety the customer wants? Okay? Is everybody happy with, like Ford famously said, we can make cars of any color as long as it's black. They only had one color of the Ford Model T. So what variety do you need to satisfy your customers? Do you need 2, 3 models, 10 models, 50 models? What is the service level required? Now this is nothing to do with things like if you go in an airline, the service offered in first class versus business class versus economy class. Service level has a technical meaning in operations supply chain management. It is the probability that you're going to be able to satisfy the customer because you have materials on hand to satisfy demand. Okay? So if service level is 95%, that means 95% of the time when customers come to you, you have the product, you give it to them. Okay? If it's 99%, then 99% of the time you can give it to them and so forth. So what is the service level that customers require? Now, this can actually vary widely. A lot of people who go to a car dealership, okay, if you ever purchased a car, did you expect that whatever color you decide upon is going to be in the dealership and you can just walk out it the same day? Most people don't expect that, right? They expect, okay, maybe they'll carry the popular colors, but if you want something less popular, you may have to wait for the car to come to you because the dealership may not have it. He'll look at other dealerships. If the other dealerships don't have it, it'll come from the factory. So it might take 2 weeks, 10 days to get the car, right? And customers might be fine with that because they understand that you can't have every single colored car in stock. Okay? Now, if you walk in to Walmart, and let's say you want milk and you say, okay, I'm going to go to Walmart, grab, milk, carton of milk. Do you expect Walmart to be out of milk? Usually no, they should have milk, right? You expect them to have milk. So a lot of customers who want to buy necessities, bread, milk, eggs, they want a very high service level. It has to be there. You can't wait 2 days for milk, you need it now. Whereas if you are going to buy furniture or a car, you're willing to accept the possibility that it might not, what you exactly need might not be available right away. Okay? So different products have different service level requirements based on how customers behave. Then the price has to do with the cost. If you're selling something really with a very high margins, you have a lot more room to do things many different ways because your cost can be up or down, you're still going to make money. If you're in like a cutthroat type of market where the prices are very low, then you have to be much more efficient, right? So think about dollar stores. Okay? Dollar stores operate on very thin margins, right? So if you are a dollar store, a supply chain, you don't have a lot of cushion to do a lot of stuff you might want to do because you have so thin margins, you can't have your cost increase by much. Okay? And the desired rate of innovation in the product. This basically means what do the customers expect in terms of new models, new features, right? So if you think about cell phones, pretty much every year, all the main companies, Samsung, Apple, they launch a new cell phone, right? So their rate of innovation is they have to come up with a new model annually, right? If you think about cars, they do have a new model annually, but usually it's incremental changes. The architecture kind of stays the same for 4 or 5 years and do like a major revamp, right? So you have small increments annually, and then you have like a major increment coming every 4 or 5 years, right? So the rate of innovation is also going to be different for different products. So depending on whatever your corporate strategy tells you, whichever markets you're going to operate in, that market will have these characteristics that you want to figure out what they are. Okay? Why? Because they're going to derive how unpredictable or uncertain or variable your demand is going to be. Okay? And that has important implications for how your supply chain works. Okay, so let's look at them one at a time. If your customer wants things in different sizes or packaging, that's going to, if that goes up, that's going to increase your demand uncertainty. Okay. So if that goes up, that's going to go up. Okay. Why is that? Think about it this way. If you want to forecast demand for PepsiCo or Coca-Cola in terms of how many liters of soda is consumed, that's going to be usually easier than trying to forecast demand of single cans and 6-packs and 12-packs and 24-packs. Okay. The greater the range of quantity you have to offer, your total demand gets split into these categories, and then each one of them is a little bit harder to forecast and predict. If your response time goes down, okay, then you have the customer is not willing to wait. If the customer is not willing to wait, then you're facing higher uncertainty. You have to be ready for anything, because imagine going to a furniture shop where the customer is willing to accept delivery after 10 days. Okay, they have more things they can do between the customer order and 10 days to fulfill the order than a store where you have to deliver the goods right away. Right? For a store where you have to deliver the goods right away, either they have to forecast demand very accurately, or they have to have lots of inventory, or they have to do something extra to be able to respond to that demand right away. The more time you have, the easier it becomes for you as the supply chain manager. Variety goes up, again, demand uncertainty goes up. Think about it this way. When I was working in retail, we would have these forecasts for electronic goods. In electronic goods, you often get new models or updates. Sometimes we'll have this flagship product, let's say like a TV set, right? Or in those days, like a DVD player was doing really well, so we're forecasting high sales. And suddenly a competitor adds a feature to their product, and the demand for our star TV set just tanks, and the demand for this one kind of picks up. Because we're offering so many different TV sets, it's really hard to predict which one is going to move where. Sometimes demand substitutes, right, and moves around different SKUs. So the more variety you offer for each particular product, the more variable the demand becomes, because people have a choice. They can switch between them. Okay. How many channels you're selling through? If you have an online channel, retail, different markets, that's going to increase your demand uncertainty as well. Rate of innovation is going to increase it, and required level of service is going to increase it. Okay. Why? Because if you only want to cater to demand 80% of the time, you can ignore, occasional peaks around a holiday or something like that. You can, or think about it this way. McDonald's kind of advertises, right? Buses welcome. So if like a whole school trip is going on a big bus, like I don't know, 50 kids all hungry, they stop at a McDonald's, they say, okay, we will cater for the whole bus. Not every restaurant can do that. If a whole bus walks into a given restaurant, they may not be able to cater, at least give this the favorite thing to everybody. They may run out of stock and so forth. So if your service level promise is high, you're going to promise service no matter what the surge in demand is, it's going to be harder for you to manage that supply chain. Okay. So let's apply those concepts to this example. We have two managers. One manager runs the supply chain for salt. Okay, so you can go to stores, buy salt. Another manager runs the supply chain for a smartphone. Okay, so your reading kind of talks about these types of products as well. Based on your reading and your understanding, which product do you think has a higher margin? Margin would be like the selling price minus like the variable cost of producing that thing. Cell phone is going to have the higher one. Very good. Okay, so cell phone is going to have the higher margin. What about forecast error? Which the higher forecast error means difficult to forecast. Cell phones. Okay. What about the stock out rate? Meaning that you go to a store and that thing is not in stock. Cell phone, right? I've never seen salt out of stock, although it could happen. but that's usually rare. They usually have kind of salt in stock. Okay. A sale, which thing kind of goes on sale? Sometimes end of the season you have like a discount, 20% off, 30% off. Which one? Cell phone, right? Salt is all. I don't think it's ever on. I've never seen it on sale. Maybe it is sometimes, right? Okay, so you can see that you can characterize different products. They have different requirements, and according to your reading, we're going to keep things simple. Have just two categories. Okay, so we can have either functional products or innovative products. So these have long product life cycle, stable demand. These have short product life cycle, unpredictable demand. So they have different demand characteristics, right? And once we map those out, then we can design a supply chain to be appropriate for that product. Yeah. Yeah. These are some other attributes, okay, that we didn't talk about in the, well, some of them we did talk about in the last slide. So life cycle, if it's higher than 2 years, then the demand is not going to have that much uncertainty versus a product with a much shorter life cycle. We talked about forecast error, stock out rate, NFC markdowns, and volume per SKU again. If you have a very innovative product, some of the products which are going to just take off in sales are going to have high volume. But if you have, let's say you talk about fashion clothing, you launch 20 styles, each style is not going to take off. So some styles take off, some just don't sell well. So on average, per style, the sales may not be very high. Whereas for functional products like bread, salt, I don't know, white T-shirt, the sales per SKU are going to be high. Okay. Okay. So that was step one. You have to understand your products and what type of demand they're going to place on your supply chain. The second step is to understand the supply side. Okay, what is the production process like? What is the supply for the materials for that thing like? And so we're going to look at stable supply processes and evolving supply processes. Okay? Okay. In a stable process, breakdowns are unlikely. So you don't have days where just things break down, you lose production. Okay? Why? Because maybe in the past there were breakdowns, you've been producing this thing for so long, you've fixed all the problems. Okay? So now the process runs smoothly. The yield is likely to be high. Yield means if you try to produce 100 items, how many end up getting produced defect-free? So if you try to produce 100, all 100 get produced defect-free, that's high yield. You don't have a lot of defects. If only 90 get produced properly and 10 have problems, that's like a low yield. Okay? Quality problems are going to be unlikely. Supply capacity is going to be sufficient for the demand. And you're going to have a lot of flexibility of supply because there are many people or companies which make that thing or provide the materials. So if one of them is hit by disaster, you just switch to somebody else, right? So you can kind of move around and make sure you get the supply. Likely to have a lot of suppliers available. You may not source from all of them, right? If there are 100 suppliers available, doesn't mean you buy from all 100. You may just buy from one or two, but there are available a large number of suppliers. Okay? And lead time may be long or short, but whatever it is dependable. Why? Because of all those things. Why is lead time not dependable? Well, maybe defects happened, or one supplier was hit by a storm or something, and then your lead time is out of whack. But here, because of those reasons, lead time is dependable. Okay? So anything that companies have been making for a long time, right? Think paper, plastic items, consumer goods, they usually have a stable process where you can expect these characteristics. Okay? Evolving is just the opposite. Okay? So if you look at these characteristics and think about, some popular companies, does any company come to mind which has had these problems? Tesla. Almost every problem here, you can find a news story about Tesla having that problem in the past few years. They had quality issues, they had battery issues, they had battery fires. They had production volume scale-up issues. When they tried to scale up production, they had so many defects and rework in the factory, they couldn't ship out the quantities on time. And so every time the problem would happen, their price would kind of dip down, and then they would fix the problem. Stock price, I mean not the price of the car, stock price come back up. Right? So I own some Tesla stocks, so kind of follow the news, but if you follow the news for that, you would have seen this play out as they have learned how to make better batteries, more reliable batteries, how to make cars, right? Making a car is a very complicated product, so they've had to learn all of it over several years. So they started with a very evolving supply process, right? Even customers, they would promise them, like you would pre-book a Tesla, and they would promise you'll get in 2 months. Sometimes you would have to wait more than 2 months because of this, okay? And now slowly they're kind of inching towards this side as they're fixing all those problems, right? So if you have an evolving supply process, that doesn't mean you have it that for life. Hopefully you'll fix the issues to kind of move it towards this side, right? But while it is evolving, you have to kind of keep that in mind when you design your supply chain, and then you can adjust it as you get stable process, okay? Okay. So if we look at, can't talk about it, let's go here. So if you look at both of these factors, we have demand uncertainty on the top, we have supply uncertainty here, we get 4 combinations, okay? The easiest to manage is probably going to be low. You know, demand is not very uncertain. You can forecast demand. Supply is stable, predictable, reliable. You have reliable supply. You have forecastable demand. You can usually do things very efficiently. Okay? So for things here, you're going to try to design the supply chain to take the cost out of the system, design a very efficient supply chain, right? Because everything is predictable, so you can plan and you can make sure that your transportation costs are low, your warehousing costs are low, your inventories stay low, and so you can have a very efficient supply chain. Okay? So you'll see that most items dollar stores sell tend to be here where the supply is stable and the demand is relatively stable because they need to have a very efficient supply chain. If they started selling fashion apparel, for example, they would have trouble because their demand would have surges, right, and the supply chain is geared up for that. So, you know, dollar store supply chain would be somewhere here. Yeah? If we move to the right, the best example, I guess, is fashion apparel, because if you think about fashion clothes, how you make them is not that complicated. They're still clothes. They're made of, you know, cotton, linen, other materials. They're stitched together, right? So the manufacturing process is nothing very new. It's pretty stable. You have a lot of suppliers around the world who can stitch clothes. You have a lot of places you can buy cotton, other materials. So the supply side is pretty stable, but the demand side can be very unstable. Okay. I have seen that with some sofas as well in furniture when I worked. When you would launch new colors each year, some of those colors would take off and the sales would just go up, and some colors would just be dead. They would have no sales, right? And so you'd have these spikes in sales based on just color. So the supply was very stable, but the demand could be very variable depending on hit or miss, whether you were able to get on the trends or not. Okay? So the supply chain here would have to be able to cater to those surges in demand, right? It'll be a little bit different than here. Okay? Then you could have, this is kind of rare, but you have cases where the product is nothing new, but the way you produce it is very new. Okay? So think about new ways to produce power. So when companies started making wind power, solar power, electricity is electricity, there was nothing new about the product. Demand for electricity, although has ups and downs, is still very predictable, right? So for example, when there's a soccer World Cup, companies who supply electricity, they know that when the halftime happens, everybody's going to turn on their coffee machine or some appliance to get a snack, and they're going to see a surge in demand, and they can predict pretty accurately that's how much the surge is going to be, because they know how many people watch football and so forth, right? And so even though the demand for electricity goes up and down, it's still predictable, but the supply side can still be complicated depending on what source of production or what type of production you're doing, right? It's a gas-fired plant or oil-based plant. It's going to be very stable. Technology will be done forever, but if it's something new, the supply side may have more issues in it. Okay? And then you have the most difficult to manage area where your product is very innovative, the demand is very uncertain, and how to make the product is also not figured out completely well. And so you have, it's basically supply side issues as well as demand side issues here. Okay. Oops. Okay. Now, so we've done the first two steps. Let's say we understand our demand, understand our products, we understand the production processes, so we know whether they're reliable or not reliable, things like that, whether we have flexible supply or we don't have flexible supply. Then step 3 is to kind of look at those two things and kind of figure out, are we going to focus on responsiveness in our supply chain, or are we going to focus on efficiency, or are we going to focus on some mixture of the two? Okay. Responsiveness means that you have short lead times or response times. So if the demand picks up, you can ramp production up quickly. Okay. If the demand is highly variable, you can still maintain a high service level. You can match those peaks. Okay. But your costs may be higher. Efficient supply chain means that you are have the lowest cost supply chain. Costs are low, but then you don't have that responsiveness. If the demand peaks, you might be stuck. You can't fulfill that demand. Okay. So we need to match this with where we are in this matrix. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about this. Now, in some cases, companies experience a trade-off. As they try to be more responsive, their cost goes up. As they try to be more efficient, the responsiveness goes down. So they could do one or the other, but not both. Okay? Think about it this way. If your demand is fluctuating a lot, like you are a restaurant and you want to be able to cater to school trips and a bus can come anytime and offload 50 students on you who are all hungry. If you're not able to cater to that type of demand surges, you probably have to have a big back room and freezers and carry a lot of inventory, right? So that you have enough, beef patties in stock that you can make and whatnot. So if you carry all that inventory, you might need a bigger back room, so that will increase your costs. Right? Retail space is expensive. You may have more utility costs because you have more freezers running, more cooling running. You may have more inventory costs because you now carry more inventory. Right? And then if you have a lean period, no bus shows up, you might have food expiring and you have to throw it out. You have other costs, right? So you're being more responsive, you can meet these surges in demand, but your cost has gone up. Okay? Think about the other end where somebody's trying to be very efficient, okay? And you see in some countries, I think especially Toyota started that. Initially they used to do that, and in some countries it still happens. If you go to buy a car, it doesn't happen here with Toyota, but in some countries if you go to buy a car, there's no way you can walk out with a car the same day because they don't keep inventory of finished cars. So you go, you look at the display models, you select a model you want to buy, you select your options, and then you can come and pick up the car after 2 weeks or something like that. Okay? Why? They don't want to carry any inventory, they want to be very lean, very efficient. Once you place the order, this order goes to the assembly line, they start assembling your car. In Japan, there are some bicycle companies which do the same thing. You go, you customize your bike, it's to your height, the frame is how you want it, the colors is how you want it, but then you get the bike delivered to your home after 2 weeks. You can't pick it up. So they're being very efficient, but now they're not being very responsive. They have a delay between customer placing the order and supplying the demand. Okay? So you can think of this that this is the curve which does the trade-off. If your cost is low, you're somewhere here, your responsiveness is also going to be low. Okay, so you're good on cost efficiency, but low responsiveness. As you move up the curve, you get more responsive, but then your cost becomes high. Okay? That is if you're on the curve. But some companies are kind of not optimized, so they're kind of bad at both, so they're somewhere here. So companies which are not at the frontier, they could move this way and they could simultaneously improve efficiency or and responsiveness, both of those metrics. Okay? So sometimes you have people talk about, well, in this company I worked, there was no trade-off, we did this, and then our cost went down and our responsiveness went up. Think about, let's say, a company automates. With the new automation, if you take out the financing cost of the robot or whatever, the robot may be cheaper and faster. So you can produce more per day and cheaper, right? So you're moving towards the efficient frontier. But the efficient frontier is determined a lot by technology, right? So whatever the current technology is, once you're up to date, now you have a trade-off. Now you can either be responsive or efficient, but you can't increase on both. Okay. But every few years, new technology happens, and this frontier shifts outward. So maybe you are here now, but then new technologies come up in the production side of things or the supply side of things, and now you could be better on both if you implement the new technologies. Okay. But as long as technology is not changing, you face this trade-off if you are on the efficient frontier. Okay. So you have to kind of figure out, where are you? Well, how would you figure out whether you are here inside or whether you are there? Unless you work for some company, how do you know your supply chain is below the frontier? You can improve both things, or you're on the frontier, you can only do a trade-off. Think about it this way. Okay, let me put that up actually. Okay. Here. Okay. So Gartner publishes these list of top 25 supply chains every year. A lot of people don't agree with their methodology. So you could argue the positions of these companies, but most people would agree that these are good supply chain companies. Their supply chains are good. Okay. Where do you think these companies are on that frontier? Are they that blue circle or are they the red circles? The red circles, right? They have, resources, personnel. They've been improving continuously, so they're likely to be on the frontier. Okay, so whichever industry you are in, you could pick the industry leaders. Who are the leaders in my industry and supply chain, and then try to benchmark yourself and see, okay, what is their response time? What is my response time? What is their cost per item delivered? What is my cost per item delivered? Right? What is their inventory turns per year? What is my inventory turns per year? So you can compare yourself with your industry peers. Now you have to be careful a little bit, because even in the same industry, some companies could be following a very different strategy. So if you're in the apparel company and you're comparing yourself with Zara, which is a very high fashion retailer, they may have they'll be on the frontier, but they'll be on the responsive end of it, not very as efficient end. Versus you compare yourself with something else, maybe Old Navy, they're going to be on the efficiency end of it, not on the responsive end of it, right? Because they have much less prices. They go for the low cost, efficient type of supply chain to cater to that customer segment. So if your strategy is like Zara's strategy, you would benchmark with Zara. Your strategy is like an Old Navy strategy, you would benchmark with Old Navy. Right? You don't want to be Old Navy and benchmark with Zara. That'll just mess you up, right? So you have to find which company is close to your strategy on that curve, and then you can figure out whether you can improve on both things, or you have a trade-off if you're on the curve or not, right? Now, how would you get benchmarking data? Because let's say you want to benchmark, so you identify the company, right? This company is in my industry, they have a similar customer base as I have, similar products, so I should be able to benchmark myself. So I want to see I'm on the frontier or not. How do you get the data to do the benchmarking?
Kind of like this, you want to assign weights to the different things.
Right, so some data you would just find it because it's public, right? They publish a financial report, so a lot of their data about their cost or inventory turns you can find, and then if you have different metrics, you can do a weighted average or something like that. So very good point, right? Because they're going to be different metrics. So some data you can find online. So let's say you found inventory turns, their gross profit percentage from financial statements, you found the data online. But there are other data like their, delivery lead time, other stuff is not published. So you can only do a very basic benchmarking with public data. Is there anything you could do beyond that? Because if you look at any supply chain operation, they're going to have like 50 or 100 metrics, right? What is their cost? What is the cost per unit to move something to the warehouses? How efficient the warehouses are? What is the cost to move something across, from the supplier to the customer? The transportation costs are, things like that. They're going to have a lot of metrics to track the performance of their supply chain. And if I want to see whether I am near the best in class or far, I can't find all these metrics published in public data. Some of them maybe I can, right? So that I can benchmark. What about all the others? How do I benchmark beyond that? So there's no way you can just be sure to be able to do it, but some companies will do is they'll hire somebody from that good company. So you hire their supply chain director or supply chain assistant director, whatever, and then he comes over and he says, oh yeah, your supply chain is way off. We were much better in Target or Walmart or whatever, right? So because even though they can't pull data out and bring it with a disk with them, they still remember the high level or some metric or some level that where you are compared to them, right? So when employees move, a lot of knowledge moves across companies as employees move. So you can just hire somebody from them, right? That is why competitors love hiring from each other, because they want to learn about each other, which is also why companies have these non-compete clauses. If you work for one company, you can't work for the competitor for X number of years, right? Thankfully, in management, that's not as common yet, but engineering is very common. Even if you're an engineering undergraduate, you do an internship at Intel, you can't work for AMD when you graduate for a certain number of years for this same reason. But in management, it's not as common, so you can still go hire your competitors' managers, right? So that's one way you could do that. Another way this knowledge moves across companies is consulting companies. So a lot of times you just hire a consulting company, not because you don't know how to fix your problems, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but because you want to compare yourself to other companies whose data is not public. So the consulting company, if they are an expert in that industry, they've worked with many firms in the last 5-10 years, they would have an idea where you rank compared to the other companies, what you are doing that others are, what you're not doing that others are doing, things like that, right? For example, McKinsey has a product where if you go to McKinsey and you hire them and you say, okay, I want to source this part from Vietnam or this country, they'll tell you how much it's going to cost the manufacturer in that country, because they have visited those factories, they know how many minutes of labor go into that part, how much raw material goes into that part, and they know the cost for those in those countries. They'll tell you when you go to negotiate with your supplier, this is what it's costing your supplier, so then you can negotiate better, for example, right? So there are ways to get data. So you can always benchmark. Okay. So let's look at some examples. Okay. Some companies have highly responsive supply chains, even with not that innovative products. Okay. So what we just treated was like a rule of the thumb, but you can find some exceptions. So this I'm going to give you the exception first. 7-Eleven are these small corner store convenience stores in Japan. Not the 7-Eleven here, now the 7-Eleven in Japan. And the problem in large cities is real estate is very expensive, especially retail or commercial real estate. So it's not very easy to just set up a huge store and carry all the products people need. So what these stores do is in the morning, let's say 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., they'll carry snacks or breakfast type items, and then they'll carry very little inventory, they'll sell out, then they'll get a delivery at 10 a.m., replenish items for lunch hour, then those will sell out, they'll get another delivery at 4 p.m., replenish for the evening. So they'll get like 3 or 4 deliveries in a day and change their SKUs in their shop, right? So very responsive supply chain, they can change their product mix, they can get a replenishment delivery if something's running out, all of that stuff within hours in a day, right? But the item they're selling is not very innovative. But if you think about what they're trying to do, they're trying to meet immediate needs of people. People want that snack right now, right? So even though the item is not very innovative, because people are not willing to wait, that is why they have to be responsive, right? And they can't be responsive by just inventory, because there's no space to put inventory. So they have to have a whole delivery chain which is responsive. On the other end, you have things like oil refineries which produce gas or fuel, steel, aluminium production, right? Producing, planks of wood, things like that. All of that, there will be highly efficient automated type of plants where you are trying to minimize the cents per whatever unit you have of the product. Okay? And then in the middle you have other things like automotive, clothes, and so forth. Okay. So once you have kind of figured out where you are, where you should be on the efficiency responsiveness scale, so you understand demand characteristics, you understand the supply side, you understand where you are in efficiency responsiveness scale and where you should be, right? Then the fourth step is to making sure you have the right level of responsiveness and efficiency in your supply chain. Actually, before we do that, let's actually go to our reading for a few minutes, then we'll conclude with this section. Okay. So let me go to this picture. Okay. One of the most surprising lines in your reading, okay, what is the right supply chain for your product, is that the author claims that a lot of companies get this matching thing wrong. Like their supply chain is one type and the product selling is another type. Okay. Why is that surprising to me? Because I would think, well, who doesn't know the difference between salt and a smartphone? Everybody knows that. So why do companies get it wrong? Shane.
Well, the example he gave in the paper with the toothpaste, I thought was a great example because.
Could you share with the class because some people didn't have the reading?
There was an example of, I don't remember what company it was, but they were trying to take their functional product of toothpaste and make it innovative by having 28 different varieties of it. When they increased all the varieties, they forced all their competitors to increase varieties to match, and when they did that, it made everybody's supply chain wrong.
Yeah, inappropriate because, yeah, very good.
Right, so instead of it being an innovative supply chain, it was still a functional supply chain, so you had these huge spikes in demand for certain types of toothpaste, and then everything got backed up and they couldn't deliver, and you had some sold out, some wouldn't get delivered, and then that was the basic gist of the article, was matching the supply chain to your product and how it can kind of go sideways even for a product that should be obvious, but then they change it and it's not.
Very good point. So you may have a perfectly matched supply chain, but something external happens. The competitor launches new SKUs and then you have to meet them, right? So a lot of companies, it happens like you go to this company and say, why are they so out of sync? And you realize that 2 years down the line, they were in sync, but then they had to introduce new products just to be in the market because everybody's doing that. And with this new introduction of SKUs, they didn't have the time or the space or the resources to shift themselves in their supply chain. So very good point. It's not that companies don't know. They were correct at some point in time, but then external events changed the market and they weren't able to change at the same speed. Excellent. Any other reason why companies get this wrong? So one is, competitor launches new products and now you're out of sync because you have to launch these new products, and with the variety, your supply chain demand uncertainty goes up, right? And now you're out of sync. Any other reason why companies get this wrong? So let's say, that has not happened for us. Any other reason that causes us to be wrong? Rich.
Could be because the company wants to be that innovative company, but really they're selling something that's not something that needs to be innovative. You're selling Toyota Camry. It's a Toyota Camry, so it's going to be an economic car. Now, is the 2019 Toyota Camry more innovative than a 2002 Toyota Camry? Yes, but it's not more innovative than a Tesla, right? So a company is getting a little confused and saying, I'm not saying Toyota's doing this, but it was just what came to my mind.
Very good point. So sometimes executives in companies want to market their products as innovative, even if they're not, because they see some innovative products jumping up in demand, right? You see the iPhone launch, it spiked up in demand, iPad spiked up in demand, so they say, oh, but maybe we can do the same thing, right? And they get tempted into this, and then because their whole supply chain is not geared up for that, they can't execute it, and then they kind of fail, right? So why are they tempted? Why are they getting into this new or trying this new venture out when they know they're not geared up for it? So anybody else want to chime in? Why would the executives who are like educated people, smart people, why do they end up making these mistakes?
Because they haven't identified the competitors correctly?
Right, so if Toyota thinks Tesla is a competitor and then they're trying to match Tesla, for example, that could happen. So they could misidentify the competitors, right? Nobody, Rich, yes, go ahead, then I'll come to you, Shin.
Executives are going to see all the money. Somebody in Toyota sees all the money Tesla can make in one car, and they say, damn, I want to do that. Well, Toyota's not going to do that. They sell economic cars, so
Right.
they sell their cars at
So some chasing the money. Shin, you want to add something as well?
Well, along the same line with the cars, it's all about the profit. They see the dangling dollar signs and they want to go after them, and they don't properly identify what they're selling, who they're selling it to, who their competitors are. They just market the same old as innovative and try to get it through marketing. their supply chain's not set up for it, and it generally will backfire in pretty short order, and their demand will drop even further.
Very good. So we have 2 points, 2 people kind of agreeing that they are chasing the money and they are kind of, stretching themselves into territory they should not be. And we saw that in the last case as well, like Pam and Kim case, they stretched themselves into the online channel where they probably shouldn't have gone there, right? So we see this happen many times where executives stretch into areas where they're not ready for them, right? So one reason is they're chasing the money. Are executives inherently greedy people that they chase money all the time, or there's something making them chase the money? Or are we all when we take all the greedy people in society and give them management jobs? What do you guys think?
A lot of executives, their pay is based on the shareholders. So they're trying to get their bonuses because we all want to get paid. But if I'm an executive, my bonus at the end of the year is based on how much I can raise the shareholder stock. If I can raise the stock based on a innovative idea, rather, whether it's actually innovative or not, I still get the spike in the stock. I still get my bonus.
Very good point. Yes, you want to add something?
Sometimes your marketing and your supply chain is not on the same page. There's an example of Campbell Soup. So they were marketing promotions, and they were marketing there's an innovative product, but at the same time you're messing up your supply chain because it's not ready for that kind of marketing promotion.
Excellent. Let me finish that, then I'll come, because you're getting into a very new point. So Shane's point is very valid that these executives don't get paid a fixed salary that you're going to make. Well, they have a fixed salary, but most of the money they're expected to make is through those bonuses, and bonuses are tied to stock price performance, right? And a lot of, I think the aha moment for a lot of business students comes when they realize if you're making even billions of profit, if you keep making the same billions year after year, your stock price doesn't go up because it's already factored into the stock price. So even if you make 3 billion, 4 billion, whatever billions you make, you keep making the same billions year after year, stock price is not going to move up, executives are not going to make good money, they have to grow it. Because once the profit grows or the revenues grows, then the stock market starts moving up, right? Because stock markets, they factor in, okay, this company is expected to earn this much in the next 10, 15 years, so that's what the stock price is based on. If you earn what's expected, right? So for example, Ericsson stock, which I bought a share of because I was just teaching my son something about the stock market. So we bought a share, and then a few days after, they missed the analyst projections by a teeny bit. They basically matched what was expected. Basically matched it, but maybe 1% even as they missed it, and the stock price fell. Okay. So if you don't beat expectations, your stock price doesn't go up, you don't make a whole lot of money as an executive. So they're always trying to do something new, which is people don't expect them to achieve, and then achieve the unexpected, right? So that is not that they're inherently greedy people. The system is pushing them to do that in a way. The incentives are set up like that. Silab, you raised a very new point. You talk about within the company. So there's stock market stuff, there's other stuff, but you're saying within the company, there's some misalignment or something, right? So what happened with Campbell Soup marketing people? What did the marketing people do?
So they had some discount going on. So because of the discount, their retailers were buying in bulk, but the supply chain was not ready for that one. So at the end of the day, they were not making more money because of the all the promotion they were offering. So they were even though they were selling more, but their profit were pretty flat.
Right. Yeah. So if you run a promotion to sell more stuff, but your production is not ready to produce more, or your delivery system is not ready to deliver the higher quantity, that's not going to materialize. And these problems actually are also very common where people in the same company don't think alike. Okay? So marketing wants to do one thing, and then the production is not on the same page, logistics is not on the same page, and so they have these issues. There's a very interesting example that I read in an article where this car manufacturer, somebody in sales saw that they had this green colored car sitting in a lot of dealership lots. Nobody's buying that green colored car. Okay? And so they say, okay, we have, because the dealers' lots are limited, they can only hold so many cars. If you have 8 spots taken up by this green colored car nobody wants to buy, you can't put the colors in demand into those 8 slots. because the space is taken up. So you want to move those off the lot. So they said, okay, let's move these green cars out, give a big discount on them. So we're not going to make a lot of money, but clear up our dealership lots to get in the colors people want. So they ran a promotion, gave a good discount. People like me who don't care about the color of their car went in and bought those green cars, right? And they moved off the lots. They said, finally, we have space. We can put the colors that are selling well, make our sales numbers go up, right? In the meantime, production people saw, oh, the green car is selling really well. Let's make more of the green car. So by the time they had cleared the lots, they had a whole batch of green cars already produced and ready to go, okay? So you could have the different parts of the company not moving in sync and causing these mismatches where production is not aligned with marketing and so forth. Very good points. Yeah. So even though this seems easy to do, in real life it's not that easy to accomplish. Okay, so where were we? We were somewhere here. Step 4. Let's talk about how do we achieve this step. Okay. I don't know if your article really gets into that, because a lot of this article and a lot of things written after this article, they talk about uncertainty as a given. So you have a product, you have certain uncertainty. If it's high, you have to be responsive. Okay. That is not always true. You should always look at, is there something you can do because altering your supply chain is expensive. You want to be responsive. You may have to increase capacity. You may have to increase inventory levels. That's expensive, costs money. It's not free. So before you go ahead and become highly responsive and spend a bunch of money, you should always check, is there a way to reduce uncertainty? So examine options in reducing uncertainty in demand. That doesn't mean that demand is going to move up or down less, or it could mean that. It just means, it could mean that you forecasted better. Okay. It could mean that you can dampen those fluctuations. Okay. Okay, let's come back here in a second. Okay. Okay, let's actually, I'll have to kind of digress to kind of go in order. Okay, so basically what the reading is saying, you have to be have a strategic fit between your product and your supply chain. If you sell pasta, especially in Italy, it's like a staple food, it's like bread. You know, you need a very efficient supply chain because people don't start just eating twice as much for no reason, right? If you are selling fashion apparel, fashions have very short season, they come in and out of fashion, and a very responsive supply chain. Okay? Actually, this supply chain was seeing a lot of fluctuation in demand in the 80s or so. Okay, why that was happening, we'll talk about it more in future sessions, but part of the reason was that once you have some staples which have long shelf life and you run discounts on them, people kind of inventory up and put stuff in the garage. People buy a lot, right, and just store it in their garage or wherever, and then they don't buy for the next month or something like that, right? So if you run a lot of discount on these products which have staple need, then the demand will still become erratic because people will buy a lot when they're on discount, then not buy anything, then buy a lot, then not buy anything, and so. So you're running the discount could actually be messing up the demand. So instead of making your supply chain more responsive, it's cheaper not to just run the discount, right? So that's one way you could change the demand instead of changing the supply chain. So basically my first point here is always to see if changing the demand is cheaper than changing the supply chain or not before you change the supply chain. Because sometimes changing the demand is cheaper. Okay. Let me skip this. I'll come back to it in a second. Okay. This is exactly why Walmart started the everyday low price program. Okay. They still have promotions, but the promotions are not as deep. Things are not like 50% off or something, they're less off, so the demand doesn't fluctuate as much, and they have the everyday low price program so that they don't introduce fluctuations in the demand because of their discount promotions. Okay? Apple does something similar. You don't see Apple products on very, very deep discounts unless it's an old model they want to get rid of. You'll not see Apple on deep discounts for the same reason. They want demand to be, they don't want to introduce more variability in the demand. There's already more variability for Apple because of short product life cycle. They want to increase it with discounts. Okay? Sometimes you are just sitting in a supply chain where you can't see ahead, but if you could see ahead, you wouldn't need to be that responsive. So in the Navy, in the U.S. Navy, there was a supply chain analyst working, and he was seeing the demand for spare parts kind of go up or down, okay, very highly fluctuating. And then he said that we have so much inventory of these spare parts because of the demand fluctuation, I can't reduce the inventory. How do I reduce costs? So he started talking to people. As he talked to people, he realized that the other departments, like the Navy, where they're actually, the captains who are the captains of the submarines and the ships, those captains would actually, in their schedule, they would schedule maintenance months in advance. Like they would know, okay, after 6 months, in this date or week, I'm going to go to the port, get the service done. But the spare part people didn't have that information, so they would just get a surprise order for these parts and see those spikes. If only they just communicated, they would know, okay, 6 months down the line, I'm going to need this part in this quantity. They don't need a lot of inventory. They can just order from the supplier, get it when they need it. Okay.
I feel like you see that a lot with like oil change places too. That's why they always give you those stickers saying like, hey,
yeah,
for this many months you should be back here. Or like you'll get emails and stuff from that. I get
exactly. Yeah.
Hey, you should be getting your oil changed now. They're trying to
Yeah.
be very normal, so they know when people should be there and when people should be coming back.
Yeah, not only do they give you a sticker, they keep tracking their own system. They put your address and what mileage you had, when the oil change, the date it happened. So then they can look at the oil change in the last few months and predict if they know that 80-90% customers are going to be repeat customers, they can predict how many will be coming back in the next week, the next month. So they don't need to carry huge inventories. They can just carry sufficient inventory. So very good point. So the first step is always to see if we can shape the demand or reduce uncertainty in the demand. Okay, now let's go back to our 4 types of supply chains here based on demand and supply uncertainty. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Here. Okay. So if you're here, you're going to have a very efficient supply chain. Here you're going to have a responsive supply chain. This is the worst of everything. You're going to have to be responsive for the demand side, but you're also going to have to mitigate risk on the supply side because supply is not stable. And here you're basically just risk management because your demand is stable, but supply is not predictable, is not reliable. So you're going to do risk management on the supply side. Okay. If you are here or here, what you want to do over time is to move here or move here because at least you want to have one side stable, right? And usually companies have a lot more control over the supply side than they have control over their customers. Okay. So if you want to make long-term investments in technology and you can figure out why the defect rate was high, you can reduce that, becomes more reliable suppliers. You can move here and take that uncertainty out of your system. Same thing here. So Tesla, for example, right now is somewhere in the middle. They used to be here and they're kind of, well, maybe, I don't know if, yeah, you could argue. See, their product is kind of not, it is very innovative, but it doesn't have a very short product life cycle. It's not that the Model 3 changes every few months. It's like the same Model 3, maybe with better batteries for a few years. So they're maybe not the most uncertain type of product. Also, people pre-book, so they don't demand in advance. But it is because of the newness of the product and increasing market share, they are kind of trying to end up here. So they were used to be here. They're trying to make their production process more stable to get here, right? So you don't just want to sit here and say, okay, well, this is my situation. I have to do risk management and I have to be responsive. You're going to change your supply side situation just like you try to change the demand side. Okay. Okay. The other stuff is kind of straightforward. You guys can read it on your own. Let me just quickly go over what are some of the main strategies. If you want to be an efficient supply chain, you're going to try to reduce cost. In operations management, we talked a lot about this sort of stuff, lean management, reduce inventories just in time. It depends if you're a chemical manufacturer, you have batch sizes, you can increase the batch size. If you have setup cost, for example, right? Reduce setup times, things like that. You can make use of IT to make sure that your demand is not very uncertain, so you can predict it very accurately and have high utilization throughout your resources. High utilization of warehouses, high utilization of production plants, high utilization of trucks or whatever shipping method you use. If you keep those utilizations high, your cost will be low, right? So you can do all of that. On the responsive side, what can you do? one of the easiest ways to do it is just to have lots of inventory everywhere. Okay? If you have a lot of inventory everywhere, you can handle ups and downs in demand. But that's not the lowest cost way to do it. The best supply chains are going to do more than that. Okay? So what are they going to try to do? They can reduce lead times. So if they had a supplier which took 6 weeks to make something, they'll try to find a supplier closer or improve the capability of that supplier so you can ship in 2 weeks instead of 6 weeks. Okay? How would Zara do this? They have some suppliers in Europe who are very next door. They can ship something in 1 week, 10 days. Right? And then they have suppliers far away which are very efficient. Right? So before the selling season starts, if they think, okay, this white shirt will sell reasonably well, they'll put the order with the faraway supplier. But when the fashion items, the demand surges, they put those orders with the local supplier, for example. Right? So you could have lower lead times. You could use postponement, which is very, very powerful. Because if you can do that, it's kind of like you have the best of both worlds when you get efficiency, responsiveness at the same time. Okay? The classic example is in the paint industry. Has anybody bought paint like 30 years ago? I don't know if you're even old enough or something. Long time ago when you went to buy paint, you would have these shelves full of different colors of paint. And if whatever color you want, you would pick that can and walk out with the paint. Okay? What happens now if you go to buy paint? Yeah, you just pick the color, they mix it right there, right? So they don't have to carry inventory. If they have 100 colors, they don't have to carry 100 different types of inventory. They just carry inventory of the plain white color and they mix whatever color you want. So that's postponement. What have they done? They moved the mixing from a push type of the supply chain, where they were mixing it before the customer order, to a pull process where they mix it after they get the customer order. How did that become possible? Because they built this mixing machine and designed those colors. The color chemicals take up a small amount of space. Mixing machine is not very big, takes a few minutes or seconds, right? So they designed that technology which allowed them to move the mixing step from big factories onto the shop floor, like the retail shop floor. And that moved mixing from a push process to a pull process, and that's basically postponement. You move push processes across the push-pull boundary to become pull processes. Okay? You also see companies moving the other way. Sometimes it makes sense to move the other way too, but rarely. So for example, what's that company called? Little Caesars Pizza, I believe, right? It's usually a pull process. You order your pizza, this is the topping I want, and then they make the pizza for you. So that's pull. They make it after you place the order. But they also have times in the day where you just walk in and they have an inventory of like cheese pizzas and pepperoni pizzas. You can just pick it up and walk out. Right? So they have moved the pull into the push for those times because they know, okay, hey, somebody's driving by or whatever, they have an immediate urge for food. They know they don't have to wait 20 minutes for a pizza. So they are trying to be more responsive, less lead time, but they have more inventory now, right? So you see companies move back and forth along the boundary, but usually you are trying to move into pull, because when you move into pull, your costs go down because all those paint inventories are gone. They don't need that paint inventory anymore. Their costs are much lower now. Right? Plus, they give you more customization. You can choose more colors now than ever before. Right? So postponement is very, very powerful. Okay. Risk hedging and agile are basically all they're doing is they're trying to manage the supply uncertainty by having inventories of raw materials, having multiple suppliers, things like that. So that's basically risk management, and I'll let you read that on your own. If you want more details on that risk management part, I have put the reference here. So this article, which I did not assign to you, takes your reading and adds the supply uncertainty part to it. So it builds on top of your reading. Okay. So if you're more interested in how to manage the supply side, the risk part, you can read this in more detail. Okay, so we are almost done. We just have a couple of things to do. Okay. Now, when you play with that push-pull boundary and postponement, what you can do is you can have parts of your supply chain which are efficiency focused and part which are responsive focused. Okay? Now that your paint mixing happens in the retail store, okay, that step of the supply chain takes care of the responsiveness needs. The supply chain beyond that point, behind Home Depot, the supply chain of paints, can be very efficient. You can produce the white paint the mother, whatever, the base color, in huge batch sizes, be very efficient. Ship in full truckloads to Home Depot to be very efficient, right? So once you have the retail shop floor taking care of the responsiveness part, the rest of the supply chain can be efficient. So when we say efficient versus responsive, it doesn't mean every single stage has to be responsive or every single stage has to be efficient. Okay, you could select part of the supply chain to handle the uncertainty and be responsive, and the rest can still be efficient. Okay, Zara has the opposite strategy. They have inventory at the retailer. Okay, the retailer doesn't stitch clothes or change colors or do anything like that. There's no responsiveness handling at the retailer part. But in manufacturing, they have excess capacity close by manufacturing plants, so they have responsiveness handled here. Beyond manufacturing, their suppliers can still be efficient. So you can spin the cotton yarn in a very efficient way. You don't have to be responsive because responsive is handled in this part of the supply chain. Okay? So don't get the idea that every single player has to be efficient or responsive to match the product. Only one or two stages have to match the product. The remaining can be still efficient. Okay, just two more things before we go. We have 2 minutes left. Let's do that quickly. This is another reason why companies find doing this hard, because not all of their customers want the same thing. Okay, good example, the best example I believe is Dell. Dell started off by having a lot of customization available. You went to Dell.com, you picked what specs you want for your laptop or PC. They were pull process, so they would assemble your laptop or PC after you ordered on the website, and they would ship it to you. Okay, so very responsive supply chain. They assemble at least the laptop or PC after getting your order. Try to be very fast by shipping through FedEx, UPS, things like that. Okay. They realized after some time that there are some power users out there who like the latest RAM and latest whatnot in their computers, and they want this customization. But the vast majority of users just want a functional laptop or desktop. Okay, so they now have two segments to their business. They sell pre-built laptops and desktops to stores like Costco, Walmart. You can go buy a Dell computer or through their website, but it's pre-built, so the assembly doesn't have to happen, in a high-cost country or after the customer order. They can make the assembly really efficient because they only need 3 or 4 models that most people buy. And then for the high-end users, they still have the customizable option, where they can customize online, and they have a lot of customization options. So they have an efficient supply chain for most of their customers and a responsive supply chain for a small portion of their customers. Okay? So you may have different customer segments where you need a different type of supply chain. Okay, that's called a tailored supply chain strategy. You tailor to different customers. Okay, we already, oh yeah. Let's see if this is the last slide. Okay. So the last thing we're going to discuss in 30 seconds before you go is another kind of reasons why supply chains don't realize they're so out of fit, the kind of thing we just discussed with you guys before. A lot of times, and it's good management practice, like you learn this in business school, you listen to your customer, and listen to the voice of the customer, you listen to your customer, right? Some researchers have noted that this can also be a trap, because when you listen to only the existing customers, you don't listen to who's not your customer, who could have been your customer. So you have people leaving your customer base because they're not happy with whether you're too functional or you're too innovative or whatever reason they're leaving it, right? Or your cost is too high because you're not aligned properly. So they're going away, but you never listen to their voice because you listen to existing customers. So that could also lead to misalignment, where you might say, okay, you keep getting to a narrower and narrower base of customers and keep being innovative or functional, whereas you could get a much bigger chunk by being something else. Okay, why is this challenging? We've talked about this a lot, but the slides give you some examples as well that you can read on your own time.